What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a crafting guide to the recently released Greedfall, an RPG by Spiders. So, diving straight into the crafting immediately, looking at the items we have in our inventory, some of them will have this line under where it says crafting, which means it has no slots for crafting, and some will have these dots. The color-coded dots are, of course, what you already have slotted into those crafting slots, as well as the quality of the item in them. So as you can see, I have two epic, or purple, whatever you want to call it, mods already in that. Now this applies for all armor types. Now typically speaking, chest has 3. Your gloves and legs have 1, and weapons have 2. Now, that's just how you upgrade armor. There is, of course, alchemy mixing, which requires science, which lets you make potions out of ingredients you can find throughout the world. There are also some quest items you can make yourself. So those are some of the things you can do with crafting. Now, before I get into any more of that, I wanted to mention that you can craft in one of 2 ways. You can pick up the crafting skill yourself, either from items that have crafting on them, because you can pick up items that give you +1 to crafting, which will then give you, a level in crafting that stacks with your current level. So if you already have 1 point invested in the crafting stat, and then you got an item that gives you +1 crafting, that gives you crafting level 2, it maxes out at 3. So that's how you can craft yourself. Now, it's not just enough to have the stats. You have to be at one of these handy-dandy workbenches here. You can find these out in the world. They're pretty common. There's one in pretty much every town, as well as the rest areas in between zones. So you use this workbench, and if you're at a workbench, it requires you to have the crafting level yourself. So if we go into an item here, look at that bug. So if we go into an item here, as you can see, this stuff will be red locked because I do not have a crafting level required to actually use it. Now, there is, of course, a second way, otherwise I wouldn't be mentioning this, gameplay-wise, and those are blacksmiths. So, when you come to a blacksmith, you will have 3 options. Obviously, the first 2 being buy and sell, or have something crafted. Now, if you click have something crafted, it basically turns the blacksmith into its own crafting table. The difference is that when you use it, it uses the blacksmith's crafting level, which is always 3, and it replaces that crafting requirement with a price. So I have to be able to essentially afford the item as well as have the materials. So I don't get out of having to have the materials on you. But, however, you can replace the crafting requirement with a price at a blacksmith. So now, as you can see, I can use any of these. Now, as far as the actual upgrades you can make, it varies with weapons and armor, of course. But they affect the physical appearance. So I'm going to pick a different weapon, see if I can actually show. Yeah, here we go. So, as you can see, it does affect the physical appearance of the item, which is really cool, as well as the actual stats. Now, you'll have to go through and kind of notice, some will just straight up add damage, some will add more stun percentage, some will add fury generation. Fury is a guaranteed hit when you're using an item. If you use a fury attack, it's guaranteed to hit. So you can kind of go through there. So it's a combination of what physically looks cool, as well as the actual stat bonuses. Now, as you can see, these upgrades, of course, also have color-coded qualities, pretty much the standard, green, blue, purple, and yellow or orangish for legendary. So pretty standard system there. Obviously, those scale, so while this one, the blue one, does 40 extra physical damage, the purple one will give you 60 extra physical damage, and so on and so forth. Pretty much the same thing with the handles. You're going to run into something like that, but as opposed to physical damage, it's armor damage, but it's always something to that effect. Now, Armor is very similar, but there is one thing I want to mention on armor. The chest piece specifically will always have a strap slot. I mean, the slots themselves will remain pretty much the same, but the strap slot isn't particularly important because these upgrades all give you +1 to a talent, which are things that let you do things in the world, like lockpicking or vigor, which actually lets you traverse difficult obstacles. And it'll also give you science, which will let you craft potions and things like that. So, of course, these are incredibly useful. So the way they balance this is you can't just craft these to craft these and give any item you want plus whatever. However, the way they balance that is by making you pick up very rare gems, and I mean rare. I've been playing for about 10 hours and I've found 1 ruby, and it's not even for the thing I need. I want to pick up lock picking, but I don't have an obsidian yet. So same thing as far as the color-coded quality goes, but for this particular slot you have to have these gems because that is probably the best slot in terms of actually increasing your stats. Stats being the important attributes you use out in the world to physically do things, which gives you access to either loot or areas that contain loot. So that is pretty much going to wrap it up on this detailed guide to how crafting works. Now, the one thing I do want to mention last is that all of these items either come from actual nodes out in the world or loot containers. You will find this stuff in abundance. As long as you're looting everything, you will find tons of this stuff. And last but not least, if you are ever having trouble finding a specific one, if you come down to the bottom where it says recycle, you can of course recycle items to collect components that you can then use to craft your upgrades. You cannot unfortunately craft whole pieces of armor. It is just the upgrades. So that said, if you recycle any of your armor, you can see exactly what components it has a chance of giving you. Your specific crafting skill is what guarantees the components, by the way. So the only way to guarantee component salvage is from having the crafting skill yourself. But that is how you can get some extra components. So if you need a specific type of leather, you can of course recycle certain items until you get a chance of that particular item if you're having trouble finding it out in the world. So there you guys go. I hope that was a pretty detailed overview of the crafting system in Greedfall for you. If you liked it, I certainly hope you subscribe and stick around. I could always use the sub numbers. But with that said, I hope you guys have a great day. See you around.